It started like most ordinary things. A calm evening, a quiet street, and me walking my golden retriever, Max, just like we'd done for the past 3 years. Max wasn't just my dog. He was my companion, my stress reliever, the only soul who could make me laugh on days when I couldn't find a reason. He knew everyone in the neighborhood, and everyone knew him. We lived in a peaceful suburban community with manicured lawns, perfect mailboxes, and a homeowners association that liked to think it ran a tight ship. You know, the kind where you get a warning if your grass grows half an inch too long or if your garbage can is out more than 15 minutes after pickup. But up until recently, I had no issues with them. I paid my dues, nodded at board members, and kept to myself. Then one morning, everything changed. It was a Friday. I'd just come back from a long shift and was relaxing on the porch with Max by my side, watching the sunset. That's when a white envelope was shoved into my mailbox. Not a stamp, no postage, just hand-delivered and sealed tight with the HOA logo printed right on it. I didn't think much of it. Maybe a community update or a flyer about a garage sale, but when I opened it, I froze. Dear resident, it has come to the attention of the Homeowners Association that your dog, Max, exceeds the community size limit and is therefore not in compliance with our pet policy. You are hereby required to remove the animal from the property within 10 business days to avoid further action. Remove the animal? 10 days? My chest tightened. Max wasn't some wild beast. He was calm, friendly, and had never caused a single problem in the neighborhood. Kids loved him. Seniors loved him. Even the mailman stopped to scratch his head sometimes. The thought of having to send him away or worse, give him up, was unthinkable. I reread the letter 3 times, hoping I'd misunderstood something, but it was clear. The HOA had decided Max was too big and had to go. That night, I barely slept. Max curled up at the foot of my bed, unaware that some strangers with clipboards had just written him off like he didn't belong. My mind raced. Who complained? Why now? He wasn't a new dog. He hadn't gained 100 pounds overnight. I'd seen people walking Great Danes and German Shepherds around here, and no one said a thing. The next morning, I decided I needed answers. I showed up at the HOA office just as they opened. The receptionist gave me a tight smile and asked if I had an appointment. I didn't. I wasn't going to wait 2 weeks to talk about this. When I insisted, she sighed and disappeared into the back. A few minutes later, a man in a pressed blue polo came out. Name tag said, Robert HOA Chair. I introduced myself and showed him the letter. He nodded like he'd seen it a dozen times already. Then he hit me with the same line. Yes, Mr. Anderson, your dog exceeds the 50-pound weight limit set forth in the bylaws. It's been overlooked until now, but after recent complaints, we are obligated to act. Complaints? I asked. From who? I'm afraid I can't disclose that, he said. But the rules are rules. I wasn't leaving without a fight. I pointed out that the rule hadn't been enforced in years, that other large dogs lived here, that Max had never caused a problem. But Robert didn't budge. It's not personal, he said. It's about maintaining standards. Standards? Since when did kindness and loyalty need to be standard-sized? Over the next few days, I walked Max around the neighborhood like usual, trying to stay calm. But inside, I was raging. I began noticing things I hadn't before: kids running up to pet him, neighbors waving from porches, a few even crossing the street just to say hi to him. He wasn't just my dog. He was everyone's dog. One evening, as we walked past the park, a little girl ran up and threw her arms around Max's neck. Her mom followed, apologizing. He's her favorite part of our walks, she said. She calls him Mr. Fluffy Tail. I chuckled, but my heart broke a little. I didn't know how to tell her Max might not be around much longer. That's when an idea hit me. If the HOA said Max didn't belong, the neighborhood could say otherwise. What if I made Max more than just my pet? What if I made him something no HOA could argue against? The next morning, I started small. I printed a few flyers and posted them around the neighborhood. Vote Max as the community mascot. I included a picture of him wearing sunglasses, sitting proudly with a big smile, his tail wagging in the wind. I set up a little petition online and shared it with neighbors. Within hours, the signatures started rolling in. People left comments like, "Max makes our mornings better," and "He's part of the soul of this neighborhood." Even the local grocery store clerk signed it and taped one of the flyers behind the counter. A few days later, I organized a Meet Max event at the community park. I brought treats, toys, and a big sign that said, "Max deserves to stay." Dozens of families showed up. Kids played fetch with him. Seniors brought lawn chairs and sat in circles, petting him and telling stories. Someone even brought a guitar and started singing. It was like a block party, except the guest of honor was a golden retriever with a goofy grin. By the end of the day, we had over 200 signatures. I emailed the list to the HOA with a simple note: "Max isn't just my dog. He's part of this community." I expected silence, maybe even another warning, but instead, something strange happened. A few days later, I received another envelope in my mailbox. This one wasn't typed. It was handwritten. Mr. Anderson, the board has reviewed your petition and the feedback from the community. We understand that Max is deeply loved and respected among residents. While the bylaws remain in place, we will make a one-time exception in this case, allowing Max to stay as an honorary mascot. Thank you for your thoughtful engagement. It wasn't a complete policy reversal, but it was enough. Max could stay. I read the letter twice, my hands trembling. I looked down at him lying by my feet, tail wagging like he knew. We celebrated that night. I bought Max a new collar, one that said, "Neighborhood Mascot," in bold letters. The next day, we walked down the same streets we always had, but everything felt different. People honked their horns. Kids waved. Some even wore little pins I'd made with Max's face on them. The HOA had tried to erase him, but the people had spoken louder, and Max, he didn't understand the politics, the rules, or the drama. He just knew he was loved, that he belonged. But little did I know, this wasn't the end of the story. Because just when things seemed perfect, something else happened in the neighborhood, something that made me question not just the HOA, but the people behind it. Someone wasn't happy about Max's win, and they were about to make sure I paid the price. It started with the small things: a neighbor waving more warmly, a family asking if they could pet Max during their evening walk. People who had previously only nodded politely began stopping to talk. "We've seen your dog in the newsletter," they'd say, laughing. I couldn't believe it at first. Yes, Max had made it into the HOA newsletter. The one thing they were trying to remove was now being praised. Irony? Maybe, but I saw it as a turning point. What surprised me even more was how quickly Max became a bridge. You see, in our neighborhood, most people stuck to themselves. Everyone had their own schedules, their own routines. But Max, with his tail-wagging charm and happy-go-lucky spirit, started to change that. Elderly residents who rarely stepped out of their homes started showing up just to see him. Parents told me their kids looked forward to spotting Max during walks home from school. He had somehow become a symbol of joy, something everyone could agree on, even if they had nothing else in common. It wasn't long before the HOA realized the tide was turning. I got a formal letter from them again, but this time, it wasn't a threat. It was a request to discuss the matter further. That's HOA language for, "We realize we may have made a mistake." So I went to the meeting. I wasn't alone. Half the community showed up. Some brought photos of Max with their children. One lady even printed out screenshots of neighborhood social media posts where Max was being called our little legend. I didn't have to say much, everyone else did the talking for me. One older man stood up and said, "I've lived here for 20 years. I've never spoken in one of these meetings. But if we're really arguing about a dog who's brought us all together, then I think we've lost sight of what community means." That shut the room down. I'll never forget the look on the HOA president's face. She had started this whole thing with confidence, probably thinking no one would oppose her. Now, she looked like she was rethinking every step she'd taken. After a lot of back and forth, they said they'd reconsider the breed rule. That was their way of saving face. And that's all I needed. But the journey didn't end there. Something had shifted, not just for me, but for the whole neighborhood. People were walking more. Kids were playing outside. A few neighbors started organizing weekend events, small things like dog parades, bake-offs, and even block movie nights. Guess who became the mascot for every event? That's right, Max, in full costume, leading the way. He even had his own bandana made that read, Mascot in Chief. What amazed me most was how a small act of resistance, just saying no to something unfair, created a ripple effect. I hadn't planned to make a statement. I hadn't planned to start a movement. I just wanted to keep my dog. But Max had done something far bigger. He reminded people that rules are meant to protect, not to punish. That joy, laughter, and connection are more important than appearances or outdated regulations. Of course, not everyone was happy. The original complainers, yes. Those 3 households still kept to themselves. They didn't come to events. They didn't stop to pet Max. That was their choice. But they no longer had the power to dictate the atmosphere of the neighborhood. And for the first time in a long time, I saw real change. People were smiling more, talking more, sharing stories. All because of one dog who had no idea what kind of impact he was making. One particular moment stays with me. It was a Saturday morning, and I was walking Max through the main street of our neighborhood. A little girl came running up to us, holding a crayon drawing in her hand. She had drawn Max with the crown and cape, standing on top of the HOA building. I chuckled, knelt down, and thanked her. Her mom walked over and said, "You have no idea what this dog means to her. She used to cry about moving here. Now, she loves it because of Max." That's when it really hit me. Max didn't just win a fight against an unfair rule. He brought people together. He gave them a reason to talk, to connect, to belong. That's more than any HOA rule could ever do. And to be honest, it changed me too. I used to be quiet, kept to myself. I didn't think I had a voice that mattered in this community. But now, I knew I did. Not because I shouted the loudest, but because I stood for something meaningful. And others stood with me. Later that summer, the HOA officially amended their pet policy. They removed the breed restriction and replaced it with a more reasonable clause focused on behavior. All pets must be well-behaved and non-aggressive, it read. Simple, fair. Max wasn't aggressive. He was a goofball with a wagging tail and a big heart. And now, he was allowed officially. That same week, the HOA held a community fair. Max was the guest of honor. They gave him a little sash that said, Neighborhood Hero. Kids lined up to take photos with him. Local vendors even offered to donate treats for him. Someone joked that he should run for HOA president. I wouldn't have minded, but the best part? I finally felt at home. Not just because the fight was over, but because the people around me had chosen kindness. They had chosen connection, and Max had led them there, paw by paw. Word about Max's growing fame spread beyond our little cul-de-sac. Families from the other side of the neighborhood began showing up just to say hello. People took selfies with him, brought treats, and even kids started drawing little pictures of Max and taping them onto our mailbox. At first, it was just cute, but soon, it became something much bigger than I had ever imagined. The same neighbors who once kept their distance from me were now waving cheerfully. Mrs. Elkins, who had always seemed grumpy, brought Max homemade dog biscuits. Mr. Rivera, who had never spoken more than 2 words to me, started joining us for evening walks with his own beagle. The dog park that was always quiet suddenly became a lively gathering spot. And at the heart of all of it was Max. I kept wondering if the HOA board was paying attention to what was happening, how things were changing, how the community was coming together because of a dog they once tried to ban. I didn't go back to confront them. I didn't need to. Max was speaking for himself now. He wasn't just tolerated anymore, he was loved. But of course, peace doesn't always last. One afternoon, I found an envelope on my doorstep. Another letter from the HOA. I hesitated before opening it. My mind raced. What could they possibly want now? I had followed all the rules. Max wasn't causing any trouble. He was just being his friendly, tail-wagging self. When I finally opened it, my hands trembled slightly. The letter wasn't threatening this time. It was an invitation. The HOA board wanted me to attend the next meeting, not to penalize me, but to discuss something. That word, discuss, it sounded loaded. Still on, I went. The room was fuller than usual. More neighbors had shown up than I'd ever seen before. Some were holding pictures of Max. Others were little paw print pins. I was shocked. Was this really happening? As I sat down, I noticed something else. The mood was different. Not stiff or angry like last time. There was murmuring, laughter, even a few kids sitting in the back. I looked around, still unsure of what this was. The HOA president cleared his throat and addressed the room. He started by acknowledging the growing attention Max had brought to the community, how people were coming together, how neighbors were getting to know each other, how there was less tension. Even the complaints about property issues had declined. He paused, looked right at me, and said, "We may have misjudged this situation." Couldn't believe my ears. Then he continued. He said the board had voted to create a new initiative, a neighborhood mascot program, and they wanted Max to be the first official ambassador. The room erupted in claps and cheers. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Just a few months ago, I was preparing for a legal battle. Now, my dog was being given a title and a badge. It wasn't just symbolic either. They proposed community events around Max dog walks, pet safety awareness days, even fundraising events for the local shelter. Max wasn't just a dog anymore. He had become a symbol of community resilience, of standing up for what's right, and of how something as simple as kindness on four legs could change people's hearts. That moment shifted something in me too. I had moved into the neighborhood, trying to stay under the radar. I didn't want drama, but somehow, through Max, I realized that sometimes, standing firm even when it's uncomfortable is worth it, especially when you're not just standing for yourself, but for something better. A few weeks later, we hosted our first community event. We called it Paws in the Park. Local vendors showed up. Kids painted doghouses. A mobile vet unit offered free checkups. And at the center of it all, Max, sitting proudly in a little red bandana, wagging his tail at everyone who passed. People kept asking me the same thing that day. How did all this happen? I told them the truth. It started with a letter, a threat, an attempt to push us out. But instead of backing down, I stood my ground. I listened to my gut. I knew my dog wasn't the problem. He was part of the solution. One small decision refusing to give and sparked something much bigger than I could have ever imagined. From that day on, Max was more than a mascot. He was a reminder that sometimes the things people fight against the hardest are the very things they need the most. And believe me, no one ever tried to ban him again. The next few weeks turned into a whirlwind. My once normal neighborhood life now felt like I was leading a small campaign. Each day after work, I'd take Max out and people would stop us more than ever. Kids would rush out from their homes to pet him. Older neighbors started to wave from porches. Even the people who used to be a little standoffish began to ask, "Hey, is this the famous Max?" One neighbor, Sarah, who lived 2 blocks down, had a little boy named Liam who was afraid of dogs. But Max, in his gentle way, slowly helped Liam overcome that fear. Every time we passed their house, Max would sit and wag his tail, never rushing, just waiting. And little by little, Liam would inch closer. First, he'd wave. Then he'd throw a stick from far away. Then one day, he walked right up and gave Max a hug. Sarah had tears in her eyes when she told me that Liam hadn't opened up like that in months. That moment stuck with me. This wasn't just about my dog anymore. Max was connecting people. Still, the HOA wasn't pleased. I received another letter, more formal this time. It claimed I was in direct violation of the behavioral policies for animals, and that I was creating a disruption in community peace. I chuckled when I read that. Community peace? Max was the calmest thing on this block. Then came the invitation. A neighborhood meeting was scheduled to discuss my dog, specifically Max's suitability for continued presence in the HOA community. It sounded absurd, but I went. I showed up, Max by my side, and what I saw when I walked into that community center blew me away. It was full. Not just HOA members, families, teens, seniors, Kids sitting cross-legged on the floor. People came to support Max. Some brought homemade signs, "Let Max stay." Max equals joy. Neighborhood hero. I looked down at Max. He was wagging his tail like it was just another walk. But I knew what this meant. We weren't alone. The meeting began stiffly, with the board reading off complaints. They mentioned leash violations, which I always respected. They mentioned noise, which made people in the back laugh. Max rarely barked. Then they asked if anyone had anything to say in response. I expected maybe one or two people to speak, but the line started forming. Sarah stepped forward first, talking about Liam. Then came Mr. Dawson, the grumpy old man on the corner lot. He said he'd hated dogs for 70 years, but Max made him feel young again. Then a teenager named Caleb shared that he'd been going through depression, and Max was the only thing that made him come outside. The stories kept coming. It was emotional, real, raw, and it made something clear. This wasn't about HOA rules anymore. This was about what community really meant. When it was my turn, kept it simple. I thanked everyone, said I never intended to cause any drama, and that all I ever wanted was to share the joy Max gave me with the neighborhood. I said, Max didn't ask for this. He's just a good dog with a big heart. The board didn't respond right away. They went into a back room for a long discussion. The room was silent. Everyone was waiting. And Max, he was just lying there, head on his paws, calm as ever. When the board returned, they looked different, less cold, less formal. The head of the board cleared his throat and said, "After considering community feedback and reviewing our guidelines, we're adjusting our policies to allow exceptions for pets who provide exceptional value to the community." I didn't even hear the rest. The room erupted in cheers. Kids hugged Max. People clapped. Someone handed me a homemade sash that said, "Neighborhood Mascot," and gently placed it on Max. I laughed, a little stunned, and whispered to Max, "You did it, buddy." After that, everything changed. The HOA still existed, sure, but it loosened up. People started organizing monthly pet walks, where everyone would bring their dogs or cats in strollers or even rabbits. Max led the way every time. Kids would take turns holding his leash. Parents snapped photos, and even the board members attended, smiling, laughing, relaxed. But the best part? The community began to talk more, connect more. We shared more meals, helped each other with yard work, and checked in on one another. It wasn't just because of Max, but he opened the door. He was the first ripple in a wave of connection we all needed, but didn't realize. One afternoon, I was sitting on my porch sipping lemonade, Max lying by my feet, when Mr. Dawson came by. He handed me a small plaque. On it was a photo of Max, surrounded by kids, with the words, "Official Neighborhood Mascot, bringing us together." I smiled and thanked him. He nodded then, after a pause, said, "That dog changed things here. And maybe he changed me too." Lean back. I think the HOA tried to bend Max because they thought they were protecting the community. But Max showed them what protecting really looks like. It's not about rules and restrictions. It's about kindness, connection, and loyalty. Max didn't follow anyone's definition of the perfect pet. He followed his heart, and in doing so, he helped hundreds of others follow theirs. Now, every time I walk Max through the neighborhood, I see the changes. I see people smiling, waving, calling out his name. Max never became a problem. He became a symbol, a furry, tail-wagging, gentle-hearted reminder that sometimes the best way to change a rule is to show what love looks like in action. And that's how Max, my dog, became more than a pet. He became the heart of our community. He didn't just win over the HOA. He won over everyone.